Before we begin today's story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Some stories are filled with excitement, while others unfold quietly, revealing life lessons that stay with us long after they're over. If you enjoy heartfelt stories about courage, hope, and the unexpected turns life can take, subscribe and join our growing community. Now let's begin. There are moments in life when everything around you looks familiar, yet nothing feels like home anymore. That was exactly how I felt on the morning I left Jordan. The first light of dawn stretched across the sky, painting soft shades of orange over the rooftops of Amman. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the streets as neighborhood bakeries prepared for another busy day. Shopkeepers rolled open their shutters, and the distant sound of conversations echoed through the narrow roads I had walked for more than 3 decades. For 33 years, this city had been my entire world. Every corner carried a memory. Every building reminded me of someone I had once laughed with or cried beside. It was the place where I had celebrated birthdays, mourned losses, and dreamed about a future that somehow never arrived. Yet despite being surrounded by people every single day, I had never felt so alone. My name is Natasha. For years, everyone around me seemed to have the same questions. When are you getting married? Don't you think it's time to start a family? You've spent enough years focusing on work. None of those questions were asked with bad intentions. Most came from relatives who genuinely believed they were helping. Others came from neighbors who thought they were simply making conversation. But when you hear the same words over and over again, they stop sounding like concern. Eventually, they begin to feel like judgment. I smiled politely every time. I nodded. I changed the subject. But inside, every question chipped away at my confidence. It became harder to recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. I wasn't unhappy because I was single. I was unhappy because I had slowly started believing my worth depended on meeting everyone else's expectations. That realization frightened me. The morning I left, my mother stood beside the taxi holding back tears. She adjusted my scarf several times before finally taking a deep breath. "You can still change your mind," she whispered. I smiled softly. "It's only a temporary job." At least, that's what I wanted both of us to believe. The truth was much more complicated. Yes, I needed the income. My father's medical treatments had become more expensive each month, and my younger brother was still trying to finish his education. Helping my family wasn't a responsibility I regretted. It was something I was proud to do. But money wasn't the only reason I accepted the position in Alaska. I needed distance. Distance from expectations. Distance from constant questions. Distance from the feeling that my own life had somehow stopped moving while everyone else's continued. Sometimes the bravest decision isn't running toward something. Sometimes it's walking away from everything you've ever known. As the airplane lifted above the city, I watched Jordan disappear beneath the clouds. A strange mixture of sadness and relief settled inside me. For the first time in years, nobody knew who I was. Nobody expected anything from me. Nobody had already decided what my future should look like. Hours passed as the aircraft crossed oceans and endless stretches of sky. Passengers around me slept peacefully. I couldn't. My mind raced with endless possibilities. What if I wasn't good enough for the job? What if the family regretted hiring me? What if I felt even lonelier than before? Every question created another. Every answer seemed impossible to find. By the time the plane landed, exhaustion had replaced fear. The airport looked completely different from anything I had ever known. Cold air rushed toward me the moment the doors opened. I had never experienced temperatures like that before. The icy breeze stung my cheeks, making me instinctively pull my coat tighter around myself. Towering mountains stretched across the horizon. Dense forests surrounded the roads. Everything felt peaceful in a way that was almost overwhelming. Back home, life was filled with constant movement. Here, even the silence seemed alive. Outside the airport, a black SUV waited near the entrance. A woman stepped out with a welcoming smile. "You must be Natasha." I nodded. Before I had time to introduce myself, she wrapped me in a warm hug. "I'm Claire," she said cheerfully. "We've been looking forward to meeting you." Her kindness immediately eased some of my anxiety. She introduced me to her husband, Ryan, who greeted me with a polite handshake before lifting my suitcase into the vehicle. "Long trip?" he asked. "The longest of my life." He laughed. "I think you'll sleep for the next 2 days." The comment made everyone smile. During the drive, snow-covered mountains surrounded us while tall pine trees lined the winding roads. The scenery looked less like reality and more like a painting. Everything was beautiful. Everything was unfamiliar. And everything reminded me that I had truly started over. When we finally arrived, the house stood quietly beside a lake whose still water reflected the evening sky. Large windows filled the home with natural light. Wooden beams crossed the high ceilings, creating a warm atmosphere despite the cold weather outside. It didn't feel like a mansion. It felt like a place where memories were made. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling that I didn't quite belong. My accent sounded stronger than ever. My clothes suddenly seemed too simple. Even my confidence felt smaller. Claire gently showed me around the house, explaining the daily routines, and introducing me to the children's schedules. Everything was carefully organized. Emergency contacts, meal plans, medical information, school activities. Every detail had been thoughtfully prepared. Oddly enough, I found comfort in that level of organization. My own life had felt uncertain for so long that seeing order gave me hope. Then came the moment I was most nervous about: meeting the children. I took one slow breath as footsteps echoed down the hallway. Whatever happened next would shape everything that followed. Natasha stood quietly near the hallway as a pair of small footsteps grew louder. A boy with messy brown hair burst around the corner at full speed before stopping so suddenly that he nearly lost his balance. He looked at her with open curiosity, tilting his head as though trying to solve a difficult puzzle. "So, you're the new nanny?" Natasha smiled politely. "I guess I am." He circled her once, studying every detail before asking, "Where are you from?" "Jordan." He frowned for a second. "Is that very far away?" She laughed softly. "Far enough that I spent almost an entire day on airplanes." His eyes widened. "That's awesome." Claire chuckled. "This is Noah. He has about 1,000 questions every day." "Only 1,000? Noah grinned. "I think it's more." Before Natasha could answer, she noticed a little girl standing several feet behind him. Unlike her energetic brother, she stayed completely still, hugging a stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest. She watched every movement without saying a word. Claire smiled gently. "And that's Emma." Emma offered only the smallest wave before hiding halfway behind her mother. Natasha crouched down to make herself less intimidating. Emma." The little girl whispered something too quietly to hear. "What was that?" Natasha asked kindly. Claire translated with a smile. "She said she likes your scarf." Natasha touched the edge of the colorful fabric wrapped around her shoulders. "Tell her thank you." Emma smiled for only a second before looking at the floor again. It wasn't much, but Natasha considered it progress. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Claire showed her the children's daily schedules, explained Noah's peanut allergy, pointed out emergency contacts, and walked her through the carefully organized family binder. Everything had its place. Every routine had a reason. Coming from a life that often felt unpredictable, Natasha found comfort in the order. Later that night, after unpacking her suitcase, she stood beside the bedroom window. Snow-covered trees stretched endlessly into the distance. The lake reflected the moonlight so perfectly that it almost looked like glass. It was beautiful and incredibly quiet. For the first time since leaving Jordan, she allowed herself to cry. Not because she regretted coming, but because starting over was far more difficult than she had imagined. The next morning began before sunrise. A loud knock echoed through her door. "Noah," she guessed. "You'll be late," he shouted. She smiled as she checked the clock. It was barely 6:30. "I'm coming." Breakfast turned into cheerful chaos. Toast burned. Orange juice spilled across the table. Emma insisted her pancakes should be cut into stars instead of squares. Noah declared cereal boring before eating 2 full bowls anyway. By 8 o'clock Natasha already felt as though she had lived an entire day. Yet something about the chaos felt strangely comforting. There was laughter. There were conversations. There was life. Instead of feeling invisible, she felt needed. As the days passed, She slowly learned each child's personality. Noah loved adventures. He climbed trees, invented impossible games, and believed every ordinary afternoon could become an unforgettable mission. Emma was different. She preferred drawing, reading quietly, and watching birds gather outside the windows. She rarely spoke unless she had something important to say. Natasha discovered that patience accomplished far more than words. One afternoon, Emma silently handed her a drawing. It showed 4 people standing beside a lake: Claire, Ryan, Noah, and Natasha. Above them, written in uneven letters, were 2 simple words: our home. Natasha's eyes filled with tears, not because the drawing was perfect, but because it represented something she hadn't felt in years: acceptance. That evening she called her mother back in Jordan. "How are you?" her mother asked immediately. "I'm tired," Natasha admitted. "But it's a good kind of tired." Her mother smiled through the phone. "I haven't heard your voice sound this peaceful in a long time." Natasha looked around her room before answering. "I think I'm finally learning that starting over doesn't mean leaving your old life behind." "What does it mean then?" "It means giving yourself permission to build a new chapter." Outside her window, snowflakes drifted gently toward the frozen ground. Inside, the sounds of children laughing downstairs echoed through the house. For the first time in many years, Natasha no longer felt like someone waiting for life to begin. Little by little, she was becoming part of it.